How's everybody doing? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. That was very kind. Sing for Science is an event series as much as it is a podcast these days, and one, I might add, whose home is probably here in Boston more than in any other city in the world where I do these tapings. So this is a big honor for me to have been included in this festival. And if you're not familiar with the show, I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm a musician, and I started this show because I'd recognized how over the course of my own life, music had often been a bridge to new things, to new ideas, new experiences, new people, and that didn't really have anything to do with music. And with that in mind, when I first became acquainted with, I guess what I'd call kind of like a, let's call it a cultural hostility towards not just science, but scholarship, higher learning, expertise, I had this idea, it was about 5 years ago, to invite well-known musicians to sit down with a scientist and talk about one of their songs through the lens of science. And then perhaps, ideally, in so doing, the fan of that musician would walk away maybe not just with a new piece of knowledge, but maybe for them music or science would no longer be alienating, maybe it would feel more accessible. So to give you some idea of what this looks like in practice, what would happen is ideally this would work and it would not go to the middle of the slide. That's Avi. And could we take me back to the beginning there? Okay. There we go. Okay, so in practice, what this looks like. For example, this is Jonathan Davis. He's the singer of the heavy metal band Korn. He came on the show to talk about his song Dead Bodies Everywhere with a mortuary science expert. Sia came on to talk about one of her many breakup ballads with an attachment theory psychologist. Both David Byrne and Jack Antonoff were here at the Museum of Science last year. David talking about eels, Jack about relativity. And what makes today's extra special is this is a Sing for Science first. This is the first time the artist we're interviewing has agreed to perform the song we'll be talking about. So we are very grateful to Josh for that. But before he comes out, two pieces of housekeeping. I strongly encourage you to RSVP for this event because it's a very important one 2 weeks from now. I'll be at Harvard with your hometown hero, the singer of the Dropkick Murphys. You may have noticed the Dropkick Murphys have been in the media almost as much as Harvard for antagonizing the executive branch of our government. So they'll be talking about labor and a just economy. And then also, if you want some free merchandise, you can click on this with your phone right now, jump through some hoops I've set up for you, and I'll give you some free merchandise out in the lobby. So again, thank you, BUR. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you to the Simons Foundation for their generous support of what I do. But most of all, thank you to all of you, not just for showing support for unique programming like this, but for public radio in this very dire time. Thank you so much. Here is Josh Ritter to perform Truth is a Dimension, both invisible and blinding.
Hello. Thank you for inviting us. Thanks for having us, Matt, Avi, man, and BUR for making this incredible experience happen. Thank you, guys. This is called Truth is a Dimension, both invisible and blinding. I got off the highway north of Desert Canyon Station. I was driving with my headlights off, just stars for navigation. My telescope, my notes, my ham sandwiches and coffee. Sometimes you must be all alone, there ain't no way to not be. I was thinking about Tanya, how things had rearranged. and everything had gone full circle. We were back to being strangers. She was with a man named Neil now. That's all I knew about him. But I was happy, she was happy, real happy that she found him. It was just after 11 when I pulled off at the lookout. The parking lot was empty, though the air still smelled like cookouts. And yes, I admit I toked one. That doesn't change what happened. Anyway, you're not my parents, and it really helps my mapping of the System 611, a Magellanic cluster I've been watching for a while. I got my telescope adjusted, and I turned it on an unassuming patch of dusty sky that was really 50 million stars, a billion light years wide. And then all at once it felt as if time had been suspended, and a vision poured into me like a bottled bin upended. I was filled with revelation, both infinite and finite, that filtered down the telescope encoded in the starlight. It said truth is not immutable, itself is a dimension. Truth can be both weighted down and warped in strange directions. Truth has a shape that alters, each according to observer. Sometimes you must be close to it, sometimes you must be further. Truth can bend and truth can break, depends on how you ask it. It frays or it may blaze out at some Paul bound for Damascus, and it sometimes gets mistook for God, sometimes for its servant. It both exists and doesn't, like a star that's not observed yet. Which all at once returned my thoughts to System 611, still twinkling down the telescope into my mind from heaven. And I stood there looking upward as the darkness turned to dawn, and received that strange transmission till finally it was gone. And I knew beyond a shadow my discovery was real. But the person that I longed to tell was sound asleep with Neil in some parallel dimension. Maybe Tanya was still mine, but in this one she loved someone else. That left me to search the sky. So I went ahead and wrote this to alert you to my findings. I call it Truth is a Dimension, both invisible and blinding. You can give me the awards now, you can knight me or whatever. I got nothing going on. Now me and Tanya aren't together. Go ahead and laugh at me and all of my conclusions in symposiums and seminars and think tank institutions. You may even talk to Tanya. Let me ask you, if you do, please tell her I still love her. That will always be the truth.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt Whyte. Each week we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Today we'll be speaking with treasured American songwriter and novelist Josh Ritter. Josh's pathway to success wound from Moscow, Idaho, to Oberlin College's neuroscience program, and ultimately to right here in Boston playing open mics in the late 90s. It was at one such open mic where he met Glenn Hansard, who then invited him out on tour as an opening act. Josh's recent song, Truth is a Dimension, both invisible and blinding, is a far-reaching contemplation on love, religion, astronomy, quantum physics, and more. Also joining us is famed astrophysicist Dr. Avi Loeb. For over 30 years, Avi has taught in Harvard's astronomy department and was a longtime member of the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, where both Einstein and Oppenheimer worked. Stemming from his belief that a 2017 interstellar object might be a piece of alien technology, Dr. Loeb has committed himself to the search for evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence through his work both with the Galileo Project and in his best-selling books Extraterrestrial and Interstellar. The title of today's episode on the podcast is Truth is a Dimension, Navigating Perspectives on Cosmology and Meaning. WBUR, it is my great pleasure to introduce Josh Ritter and Dr. Avi Loeb. Wow, thanks for that. Like I said, sing for science first. So, with your blessing, I'm going to read my favorite verse from that song you just sang for our podcast listening audience. Truth is not immutable, itself is a dimension. Truth can be weighted down and warped in strange directions. Truth has a shape that alters, each according to observer. Sometimes you must be close to it, sometimes you must be further. Truth can bend and truth can break, depends on how you ask it. It frays or it may blaze out at some Paul bound for Damascus. And it sometimes gets mistook for God, sometimes for his servant. It both exists and doesn't, like a star that's not observed yet. Those are some incredible lyrics.
Thank you.
How did you arrive at the concept of truth being dimension?
Well, the reason why I thought, like, I guess this song felt special to me is that it came to me all at once, you know? And, like, I think sometimes that's a beautiful thing when it happens in any situation, you know, where you receive a gift or an insight that comes out of nowhere. And with that song in particular, I started with just the idea of driving with my headlights off, trying to go by starlight, and then everything else came out of that. It just happened so fast, and it felt like seeing something for the first time that I didn't expect, you know.
Do you remember when that lyric, in it being spilled from the fountain in that moment, when that lyric hit you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just sitting at the kitchen table at like 10 o'clock in the morning, you know?
Yeah.
When I usually write after the kids go to school and I'm filled up with ideas or just not an idea, but like the need.
Right.
To like get something just to be in myself a little bit, you know, and then something like that happens, and it's the most amazing feeling. I'm sure Avi has had that feeling before.
Well, if I can comment first, I love the song.
Thank you.
Truth is indeed what we should be seeking. And the one definite truth that all of us are aware of is that we will die. Everyone in this room will die. And therefore we get attached to the illusion that we are important. What does it mean? It means that we focus down, look down at other people, try to gain status, try to have possession of material things. But if we only were to look up, we would realize that it's not about us, because humans came to exist only a few million years ago. That's just one part in 10,000 of the age of the universe. We are not at the center. We know that, even though the Vatican insisted that that's the case for a while. And they put Galileo in house arrest, but in 1992, they admitted that Galileo was right. We are not at the center of the universe. It was a bit late, decades after we landed on the moon, but they had no choice. It would look foolish for them to keep insisting. And most of my colleagues, imagine that, most of my colleagues still think that something like us near another star, and there are hundreds of billions of stars like the sun just in the Milky Way galaxy, and most of them formed billions of years before the sun. Most of my colleagues, if you ask astronomers would tell you that it's an extraordinary claim to imagine something like us forming around another star. And I say, that's an ordinary claim. Just read the news. There is a lot of room for improvement. We are not that, we are not the pinnacle of creation. So the conclusion from this brief history of science is that, even the smartest people tend to believe in our self-importance. However, if you are late if you arrive just at the end of a play and you are not at the center of stage, obviously the play is not about you. And in order to recognize that, you need to find other actors and ask them what the play is about. Most of the real estate is beyond Earth. We don't keep that in mind. And so we get arrogant by conquering a piece of land, by feeling that we are superior to some other people, by having this illusion of self-importance. And that's the fundamental truth, that we are not that important. And all of our life we are spending in trying to impress others. I don't have any footprint on social media for that reason. I don't care how many people like me. That's not the issue. We have such a short time. Let's figure out the truth during this short time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so interested in the way I think that the way that you approach something when you are there and you're working and you're observing something, so far away. Do you ever feel in terms of like truth as an approach, where you are approaching something that you're looking at, like a star? It feels to me sometimes, and I wanted to ask you this: do you ever feel like you were approaching that place as you are observing it, or is it approaching you?
Well, the way I think of it is like going on a date, but in difference from going on a date with a human, all bets are off. You don't know what the date would look like.
Right.
And it's exciting. Yeah. It's the most romantic question in science. Do we have a partner? And Enrico Fermi, a physicist, had lunch in 1950 at Los Alamos, and they were talking about extraterrestrials. And he said, where is everybody? And that's a question that every lonely person asks. And what you tell a lonely person is, don't be that presumptuous. You're not that special. Your partner will not come and sit next to you. You have to seek a partner. You have to go to dating sites. At the very least, look through the window of your home and check if you have neighbors. And we have billions of other houses on our cosmic streets. It's just, we have Earth-Sun analogs that look just like our home. And we claim very arrogantly that they probably have no residents. That's presumptuous. And Enrico Fermi didn't even build a telescope to look up the way you describe in the song, just checking. So many times when people say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, what they say is, we should not fund this research. And I say extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary funding. And attention and time and research going into that. We don't even know what 85% of the matter in the universe is. We call it dark matter. We invested billions of dollars searching for specific particles, haven't found them. There are lots of questions that we have no clue about. So we should be honest and humble. If you ask me what would be the first question I ask an alien if I ever have a partner that I find, and my question would be, what happened before the Big Bang? That's part of our cosmic roots, but also it will teach us about how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, the two pillars of modern physics, which we don't have a good theory for. And at that point, once we understand where our universe came from, we'll have a recipe for creating a baby universe. Even if we can't do it in the laboratory, we will know what is the recipe. Just like in a recipe book. If you know the ingredients, you know how much to heat, those ingredients, put them together in a certain order, you could get a baby universe, at least theoretically.
Let me ask you something, because Josh is asking, I think what Josh was getting into was kind of your creative process, and there's something inherently creative about your process as well. And you just mentioned something that I noticed in your most recent book, this idea of the baby universe. So Josh, because I kind of want to drill down a little bit on when you're talking about, do you feel like you're approaching truth or it's approaching you?
Yeah.
And you came up with this idea about, could an advanced civilization create a baby universe in a test tube? Which to me is just so completely creative and just so far out. You know, what's your process of coming across an idea like that?
Well, I think, if you...
First of all, please explain what that idea is.
Well, as I said, we see that the universe is expanding, and if you reverse that movie and go back in time, there was a time when the density of matter and radiation was infinite. We call it the Big Bang. And it's amazing that the Big Bang happened at the same time throughout the entire observable universe. So the universe had the same initial conditions to 1 part in 100,000. Quite remarkable. There is an interesting question. How was that arranged? You know, because different points could not speak to each other. So, but at any event, that was the starting point. So now, Einstein's theory breaks down. It just cannot describe this state of infinite density of matter and radiation. And we know why. It's because it's lacking quantum mechanics. Once the density of matter gets very high, you have to include quantum mechanics in the description of what's going on. And over the past half century, the thousands of theoretical physicists insisted that they would go on a path that tries to unify quantum mechanics and gravity by imagining extra dimensions. And that didn't lead us to a theory that can make predictions about what happened before the Big Bang. So unfortunately, it was not successful. It's called string theory. So we are ignorant. Now, with respect to my idea, it's basically to say, if we understand how things started, we could imagine perhaps creating those conditions in the laboratory. It's very simple. And the significance of that is that if you ask yourself, what is God? Okay, so if you were to advertise the job in the newspaper, you say, okay, anyone that thinks that they are God should apply to it. Obviously, you'll get an application from the White House. Seriously, you know, the one condition would be that you are able to create a universe. You know, that's a prerequisite. If you want to apply for that job, you have to create. You know, that's written in the Old Testament. So what I'm saying is that an advanced enough scientist could apply for the job. So God and an advanced scientist are not very you know, if you imagine Moses in the Old Testament watching the burning bush that was never consumed, and that convinced Moses that a superhuman entity exists, God. Now, if we were to bring Moses a cell phone, I think he would have been more impressed than a bush that is burning. And moreover, there would be a GPS app on the cell phone that would save Moses 40 years going in the desert before reaching the promised land. You know, that would be a great advantage for Moses. Within a few weeks, he would reach the
What's
promised
that Arthur C. Clarke quote that advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic?
Right. So what I'm saying is, if we were to encounter, I mean, he would think of it as a product of a superhuman entity, but in fact, it's humans that created the cell phone. It's just humans that understood science and technology, right? So they were able to create something that looks wondrous. And so my point is, when we encounter a civilization that had more than 100 years of modern science and technology, perhaps they had 1 million or 1 billion, you know, it would look, we would be filled with religious awe. And it would resemble the experience of Moses. So what I'm saying is science at the highest levels could connect to religion in some sense.
That's something that you said that was really interesting to me about got me thinking with the idea of something like the idea that is really far from our normal thinking, like they say, like the universe just in a test. How would that come about? That seems also very associative, and I'm thinking about your at what point in your day do you ever experience moments that are truly associative, and you've brought together not just the work you've been doing, but also the other parts of your life that seem, or something that you notice, just a stray detail on a building or a leaf that brings you to a new understanding? And are those moments for you, when I have those moments, they are both exciting and a little embarrassing to me, because I feel like I can't explain where they came from.
Well, these are the very rare moments when you have something really significant. But I would say that original thoughts bubble up in my mind, my brain, all the time, just like bubbles, in soda water. I mean, I have a routine. I jog every morning at sunrise. But there are always things that inspire me, that I see around me. And it's related to people asking questions. So, for example, there was a group of religious scholars under the organization Christianity Today that came to Harvard, and they wanted to know, if we find extraterrestrials, would that shake their beliefs? Would that be a threat to their religion? And I said, look, I have 2 daughters. When the second one was born, it didn't take away any of my love to the first one. Right. So it's very demeaning to think of God as a parent that can attend only to one child. And they accepted that. So in this case, it's them asking a question that inspired me. In other cases, it's other people asking. Yeah. But usually I need some reason to think in a direction that... But it happens all the time. And once it stops happening, I will call it quits. I would ask someone else to shoot me, at that point, because life will not be interesting.
Do you think that following on from that, that the work you're doing has a forward kind of mythological component? Do you feel that? Do you find that you are inspired by exploration of other kinds, or what I'm saying is sometimes it feels like we're looking backwards into myth, into history, far, far back for examples of what we're trying to think about and describe. And at some point there must be a point where we begin to look forward as a new source of mythology and understanding.
This is an excellent question. I was asked in an interview just a week ago, how do I want to be remembered? And I said, by the work that I will do in the future. Because I don't care about the past. I'm not very proud about the past, but I think there are lots of things to learn. So in fact, I would be delighted if AI-assisted medicine will give us infinite life. Like if we will become immortal, I see that as a great advantage, because then we can address all the puzzles that we don't understand right now. And that there is so much to understand, Just the fact that we don't understand most of things, that life happens and, people pretend to know more. I tell young people, never pretend to be the adult in the room. Maintain your childhood curiosity, because, the knowledge we have is just an island in an ocean of ignorance. And things happen to us throughout life. As long as we maintain curiosity and modesty, I think we can make it. And the problem is that we don't. If you look at most people, they seek something else. They, as a compensation for all the misery. It's just like Oscar Wilde said, we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.
Could you expand on there's another thing that came up, and maybe it's one of your recent Medium posts, where you're talking about mimicking the regenerative capabilities of worms, right?
Yes.
In order to become immortal.
Yeah, so actually there is an animal that appears to be immortal. It existed for 400 million years. It's called planaria. It's a kind of a worm that if you cut it, in fact, someone cut it into 279 pieces. And each of the pieces developed a new set of organs that created a fully equipped animal, and it has a brain, and it keeps memory. So just imagine Marie Antoinette during the French Revolution, put on the guillotine, and they chopped her head, and then a new head would come out. And the head that they chopped would develop a new body. They would get 2 Marie Antoinettes. Wow. It's not good practice for the rebels, to make more of Marie Antoinette. But the point is that such an animal could potentially be an excellent example for an interstellar traveler. It could perhaps travel for 1 billion years and go from one side of the Milky Way galaxy to the other. And we might develop that ability. I really think nature is amazing, because if you consider the human brain, we are now creating AI systems that potentially will reach within the next decade most of the cognitive abilities of the human brain, but they require gigawatts of power. The human brain is only 20 watts. That's nothing. Moreover, the human brain is attached to a body that can reproduce. I haven't seen a silicon chip that can reproduce. And we have to monitor the silicon chips in vacuum chambers and be very careful. Whereas, the human body, it's nutrients from that come naturally in our environment. So even our most accomplished technology is so inferior relative to what nature developed in the context of biology. And maybe at some point we'll realize that to make thinking machines, it makes more sense to use chemistry rather than silicon chips. But the point is we have a lot to learn. And an interesting question is whether our intelligence was seeded by an interstellar gardener that visited us a few million years ago and saw the chimpanzees and planted something into their DNA. There was a recent paper in Nature magazine just a month ago that analyzed the DNA of chimpanzees and found, including the junk DNA, that 14% of it is different from that, or 14% of human DNA is different.
Wow, that's do you let me, this is an interesting question. I'm wondering, sorry, I just
take your time.
It was
I got several on deck.
Okay, go for it. It's coming back to me.
Because part of my job here is to point out through lines where I see them. You've already talked about the burning bush. I'm no biblical scholar. Can you talk about Paul in Damascus?
Sure. Yeah. Well,
because it seems like there's the through line being spiritual revelation and its intersection with science. So what are you talking about?
Well, when I was thinking about truth and like its sudden our exposure to it all at once, I was trying to think of episodes that were like that, and the burning bush was one for sure. And I was raised very, very religious, and have been loosening that grip around my own soul a while now. And but one of the things that I did realize is having two parents who were scientists and have on one side an incredibly rational approach to understanding existence, followed by the other side, which was like, Moses saw a burning bush, like this guy Saul saw something in the sky on the road to Damascus, which made him change his name and change his life entirely for whatever reason. And it made me feel that there is that thing of you can have faith. Faith is I have trouble with that, but like knowing something is different. And when you know something, it's not always about a rigorous approach. It's a sudden certainty. And that is so beautiful, because I find so often, like when I'm working on a song or when I'm working on a project or something, there are ideas that are close, but when it lands on the one thing, it's a completely different physiological response in my body.
Yeah, what I would like to emphasize is that physics is amazing, because when we come up with laws of physics, for example, describing electrons, an electron is a particle, charged particle. Turns out that all the electrons in the universe, 10 to the 90 of them, all of them follow the same law. Just think about it. We have a legal system that we establish in our society. We wouldn't need any courts. We wouldn't need jail if all people were obeying these laws, right? And they don't. And so it's amazing to realize that the physical reality that underlies it all can be described by a set of laws that are never disobeyed. If you find an electron that disobeys the laws of quantum mechanics, you'll get a Nobel Prize. I assure you that. There is no electron with free will. Actually, I think if we want to speak about free will or consciousness, I was asked this question just a couple of days ago. I think free will is a result of the complexity of the human brain. There are so many free parameters in the synapses that make the neural network that we have in our brain. And the AI systems we have right now haven't reached yet the number of connections, number of parameters, but they will. The point is, once a system reaches that level of complexity, it's sort of unpredictable, especially since it interacts with an environment that is not fully contained, that has some freedom in it. So you end up with what you call free will, simply unpredictability of the way people behave. And now I think the same will happen once we artificially generate a neural network that is as complex as the human brain. The interesting question is, what will happen when we go beyond that? Like, the human brain is limited by consuming 20% of the metabolic power of our body. So in other words, our brain could not have become bigger. It's already using a fifth of all the power in our body, a fifth. It couldn't be bigger. Yeah. Now, we are limited by that, but in principle, you can build more nuclear reactors and make AI systems even more powerful. And so the question is, what will be the cognitive states that go beyond, free will or consciousness that we associate with the human brain?
Very exciting.
It's exciting because it will be superhuman.
Yeah.
And I really look forward to interacting with a superhuman entity, be it from outer space or be it AI. Many of the people who develop new technologies are afraid, are worried. Some of them, I think, they're afraid because they never had kids. Mm-hmm. And when you have a kid, you can't control the kid. If you have an intelligent being, you can't just keep it doing what you want it to do, unless you teach it to be religious, maybe. But, but the point is, you have to realize, if you build an intelligent system, it will behave in ways that you don't approve. That's just the nature of intelligence.
Well, I have that leading on from there, then this is like maybe a closer to earth question, but I really, from my very own small, tiny business that I've made around making songs, which I love to do anyway, but like I have to live, I've got family and everything. So I am wondering about your experience with the very human concept of money and how it functions in limiting our ability sometimes to discover.
So my view about money is that it's good to have just enough so that it buys you freedom, in the sense that you don't depend on other people as to what you choose to do. That's not a very high threshold. I mean, it is high for many people, but it's not in the billions, it's in the millions, or maybe around $1 million.
But for your research?
So for the research, I really regret that I never became a business person at a young age, because then I would be able to pursue my research without begging for money, either from funding committees that are populated by conservative mainstream scientists. They often say, we don't want to take any risks in order not to waste taxpayers' money, but they don't ask the taxpayers what they're interested in. So then they explore dark matter, extra dimensions. These are things that the public, as far as I know, cares less about than whether we are alone or not in the universe. Moreover, the mainstream of astronomy is really willing and defined in the US as the highest priority to invest $10 billion in the Habitable World Observatory, the next telescope that will be built within a couple of decades, to search for microbes. Why? Because they might be much more abundant than intelligent beings. And I say, no, actually, even though they're much more abundant, it might be much more difficult to find them because their signatures are very subtle, just molecular composition of the atmospheres of exoplanets, whereas if we find a gadget in our backyard that was manufactured by an intelligent civilization, it will be clear evidence, much clearer. So we need to hedge our bets and invest at least 10% of that money. As of now, 0 is allocated to the search for something like us elsewhere by federal funding agencies. And I think we're missing an opportunity.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Weren't you, if I recall, when you first introduced this idea of let's consider what an advanced civilization is capable of, that was to sort of, in criticism of our current methods, or up till now methods of looking for extraterrestrial intelligence, right? Like, in other words, let's stop looking for radio signals. Let's consider what they might be capable of.
Well, that was triggered by the discovery of the first objects from outside the solar system that happened only over the past decade. The first object was Oumuamua, roughly the size of a football field, that was tumbling every 8 hours, and the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10. So an artist depicted it as a cigar that is 10 times longer than wide, but in fact, the best fit to the variation of reflected sunlight was that of a flat object. That's what really triggered my interest. I said, well, this is strange. It's not like a typical rock, and it's the first object from outside the solar system. Why is it so anomalous? And moreover, it exhibited an excess push away from the sun, a non-gravitational acceleration. And my colleagues are arguing, it's a dark comet. It's a comet where you can't see the cometary tail. So the rocket effect is pushing it, but you can't see the cometary tail. And I felt like the kid in Hans Christian Andersen's Tale, where I said the emperor has no clothes. This object doesn't have a cometary tail. And my colleagues, the experts, are saying, oh, it has a cometary tail. You can't see it. Why not be honest and then be intrigued? And we currently don't know. We didn't take enough data, but within a few months, there will be a new telescope in Chile that would monitor the southern sky every 4 nights with a camera of 3.2 gigapixels. Yeah, that's the one. That's the Rubin Observatory, and hopefully we'll find more, because as a scientist, I am happiest when there is a flood of data, because then the adults in the room cannot shove the anomalies under the carpet. If something looks artificial, they will have to admit it. And so I think science is a learning experience. If I'm wrong and all of these are very strange rocks that we see, since then I discovered another one that collided with Earth, and we went to retrieve the materials in the Pacific Ocean and found them, and there will be a Netflix documentary on that coming out in about 8 months. We found some molten droplets, debris from that very anomalous interstellar meteor that was moving extremely fast.
That looks like a ball bearing.
Yeah, so these are molten droplets from a fireball that was releasing 1% of the Hiroshima atomic bomb energy as a result of the friction of this object with air. And it melted things. And so we brought some materials. We hope to go again. It will cost $6 million for us to go there and put a robot, a remotely operated vehicle, on the ocean floor to figure out the truth. What this object might have been. Was it a rock, or was it a Voyager-like meteor? I'm curious, and I don't know the answer in advance. And even, the US government is talking about objects they don't fully understand. So a month ago, I was invited to give a briefing to the US Congress. And I said, look, you should invest $1 billion in a Manhattan-like project to figure out what you don't understand, because it's really embarrassing that the intelligence agencies are getting together with the Defense Department, a budget of $1 trillion in fiscal year 2026. And there are objects in the sky they don't understand, right? So it could be something like the Chinese spy balloon that the private citizens noticed and then it was shut down, but it's embarrassing. So it's a matter of national security. And I'm happy to lead a project, bring in the very best minds in science to figure out these objects. And then at the very least, the Department of Defense will be able to use the AI algorithms that we develop and the sensors that we develop to protect the nation so people can sleep better at night. They are not doing it right now. There are objects they don't understand. And maybe 1 in a million of those in the sky might be extraterrestrial from another star. And if so, the discoverer will get a Nobel Prize. That is just the icing on the cake. So I was asked after that, oh, you just want to get the Nobel Prize. And I said, I don't care about the Nobel Prize. I am here to say that if I discover interstellar intelligence, extraterrestrial intelligence, then I would decline the invitation to visit Stockholm by the Nobel Committee, just the way Bob Dylan did or Jean-Paul Sartre, because why would I waste time on an award given by humans to humans when there is something much bigger to discover, learning from a higher intelligence
Here's
out there.
through line number 2. Bob Dylan has covered one of Josh's songs. And I saw an Instagram post that you said, sorry to put you in the hot seat here, but it was something like, how gratifying it was to have your heroes cover your material. So glad that I made that decision and took the road for songs over science.
Yeah, the thing that I really feel this with Avi, and I have for a long time, which is why I was excited to talk to you. But like, there is a beautiful thing about discovering that there are wedges in that and cracks in the walls of all of our realities that are we can choose to either be afraid of or ignore, or like I think I've chosen in the last little while, especially just the idea that we can choose these things, these anomalies, and all these other cracks in our regular everyday reality to illuminate our own lives, and that should have no judgment. It can't be like, if I choose to think like some crazy things about the way life works and the way our own existences are, then I should be able to say, this makes me happy. And these questions make me happy. They make me excited. And the idea of looking up at the cosmos as a mirror of our own ideas, that the outside that great enormous universe can be incredibly scary, but it can also be just absolutely soul changing when you let a little bit of that wildness in.
The amazing thing about the universe is that we can actually figure out what happened earlier by looking at regions that are far from us. If you look at a mirror, I wrote about it this morning in my essay on medium.com. You look at a mirror that is, let's say, 20 inches away from you. What you see is an image of yourself from the past, because it takes light about 2 nanoseconds, billionths of a second, to hit your face, reflect from the mirror, and get to your eyes. Okay, so you are seeing an image that is old. But if you imagine a mirror that was 1,013 light years away, a giant mirror, you would see what happened on Earth a year before Jesus was born, okay? Because it would take 2,026 years for the light to do the round trip. Wow. And the universe is so vast that the light travel time gets to billions of years. And you can see what happens close to the beginning. But there is only a finite region that we can see. And that's the region that light traveled through since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. We don't know what happens beyond that. We know that the conditions continue for at least 4,000 times the region that we can see. But some people speculate. They say we live in a multiverse. And I see that as a problem because they also argue that anything that could happen will happen an infinite number of times in the multiverse, meaning that there is a copy of you, Josh Ritter. If you do something wrong here, there are infinite numbers of copies of you doing something right out there. And that takes away the responsibility from you. So I think actually the speed of light is just like the blinkers on the eyes of a horse. You put the blinkers when a horse walks down the street so that the horse will focus on the road ahead. If we were to think about what might lie beyond our observed universe and imagine that no worries, things are corrected out there, we wouldn't take responsibility for the road ahead. I don't like this idea of speculating about regions that we can't see.
Yeah. So do you believe that there are other ways of perceiving and examining something like a star or a galaxy in ways that we haven't even theorized yet?
Oh, definitely. Just over the past decade, we discovered the universe in something other than light, which is gravitational waves. These are ripples of space and time. And in 2015, the LIGO experiment that was actually led and envisioned by an MIT physicist, Ray Weiss, he told me how much trouble he had. We flew from Washington one time, and he was explaining to me for an hour how his colleagues at MIT did not support him. And when the president of MIT asked whether they should invest funds in his research, they said no, it's speculative. But then LIGO was constructed thanks to a visionary administrator at the National Science Foundation and ended up being built, and in 2015 was open to observe the universe. And amazingly, within a month, there was a signal from a collision of two black holes at the edge of the universe that was easily observable, detected by the LIGO experiment. Nobel Prize was awarded for that. And we now routinely observed events of that nature with LIGO and some other gravitational wave observatories. So we are observing the universe in a completely different way. We still don't know what dark matter is, dark energy is. Dark energy, by the way, that fills up the universe, it's 70% of the mass budget right now. Matter makes 30%, and out of the matter, 85% is dark matter. So only 5% of the universe is made of the material that we are made of. And so my point is there is a lot that we don't understand. Just to give you an example, how remarkable it could be if we realize something new. Einstein's gravity allows for a mass to be potentially negative. So we know about the Earth being a positive mass that attracts us, but imagine if you had a negative mass, it would repel gravitationally. If you put a negative mass next to a positive mass, the two together would have zero mass.
Right.
And such an object would float under gravity. So if we could make an object with a negative mass, think about Starship, this giant rocket that we are celebrating, some people. It is mostly fuel. Most of the huge structure of Starship is fuel, and very little of it on the top is payload. If we had access to negative mass, we could lift it out of the gravity of the Earth with just a mass comparable to that of the payload. It would be tiny. Just you give it a kick, a nudge, and it flies out. So you can escape gravity without fuel. That's just an example of something that we might not realize. If we had negative mass, just to give you another example, it's possible to build also a time machine.
All right.
And I know one thing, that there is no Jewish physicist in our future that had access to a time machine. Why do I say that? Because, if I had access to a time machine, I would go back to the years before the Second World War and kill Hitler. that would save the lives of 6 million Jews and 65 members of my father's family. So the fact that it happened means that no Jewish physicist had access to a time machine in our future.
Wow, that is, yeah.
So maybe it doesn't. Maybe there is no negative mass. That's.
That's fun. Well, when you were talking about the gravitational waves and the LIGO, I remember reading something about the actual the note that was created by that. Was that is that something I made up? That
yeah. Yeah, you can hear. You can translate gravitational waves. Let me just explain what they are. So according to Newton, gravity is a force, but according to Einstein, he realized, based on the experiment that Galileo did, that all masses, all objects fall the same way under gravity. So it means that, that gravity may be related to the curvature of space-time, because all objects respect space-time, and therefore they would move the same way. Now, so in particular, you imagine the sun and the earth going around the sun in a circle. It's just like a marble that is moving in a circle in a trampoline where you put a very heavy object in the middle of it. So the trampoline surface is curved and the marble moves in a circle. If you were to lift out this heavy object, the marble would move in a straight line. The earth would move in a straight line if you remove the sun. That was Einstein's insight. But now imagine two objects that are massive and moving around, so they would create waves of curvature of space-time. These are gravitational waves. And we detected the waves, the storm that was generated when two black holes came together from the edge of the universe. That's what gravitational waves are. Now, the frequency of those waves that we detected is 1,000 hertz, of order hundreds of hertz, actually. And that reflects the characteristic size of the black holes that collided. So that size divided by the speed of light gives you a characteristic timescale. The inverse of that timescale is the frequency that you observe. So the point is, you can make sound with the same frequency and listen to it. Now, when the two black holes come together, the frequency gets higher. Because they get closer, and so as a result of that, there is sort of a change in the pitch of the signal, which you can hear, you can listen to.
Wow, that is fun.
I hadn't heard that. So we're about out of time here. There is a whole lot we didn't get to cover. Namely, Josh, that you reference quantum physics in the song with the observer effect. And Avi, I'm hoping maybe we do a part 2, the three of us someday, where we'll talk about that. But folks, please help me give it up for Josh Ritter and Avi Loeb.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Big round of applause. That was wonderful.